Everyone, welcome back to another episode of Unlocking Doors. I'm here with Michelle Castle. Today, we are going to talk about pricing strategy and how it can affect the sale of your home.
Mm,
Yeah, so
that's a good
this
one.
is a good one. So primarily, I work with sellers, and I see this a lot.
Bet you
And
do.
but before we jump into kind of my experience on it,
Yeah.
I know you've sold quite a few homes. I know you've financed a ton of homes. Um, when you see a property hit the market and the price is up there,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts and what do you think? Like, what do you think most buyers think whenever they see a price and it's like, oh, the seller's just testing the market? What do you
Well,
think?
and I really, it, I almost feel like I'm at an unfair advantage because I have been in the real estate market for a long time, but even seeing it just through the eyes of my buyers. There are some houses that come on the market and you do wonder, you're like, I wonder if they just think that someone's going to fall in love with their house and the price really doesn't matter. Because for years, for 2 years, we experienced that. Really, we had a lot of cash buyers and price really didn't matter if someone truly loved the house. Now, I think there's a lot more. I think pricing is more important now than ever before because people are more hesitant to spend the amount of money that they're spending for a house because it costs more on the financing side of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before, whenever the rate was 2, 3, 4%, it didn't matter. When rates are 6, 7, and 8%, the payment matters a lot. And so pricing is being analyzed a lot more than what it was before. So I see some houses I saw some last night and they were, new listings. And I'm like, I think that one's overpriced. Now, I don't have access to the MLS, but, I'm watching real estate. And any buyer that's like testing the market out is watching real estate.
Right.
So when you see that, I always think, well, are they just testing the market to see what's going to, if someone makes an offer and if not, then they're just going to lower the price. And if that's their strategy, how long should I wait to make an offer on that house? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like as a seller, I've always thought I want to price my house to move,
Right.
not to see what might happen if I go ahead and price it too high. Because the longer it sits on the market, the more buyers start thinking, well, I wonder what's wrong with that house. It hasn't sold yet. Or why do they keep lowering the price? Why didn't they just price it right the first time?
Right.
That's how I see it. And that's how I hear buyers talk about it. But I'm interested, number one, I don't know that I could ever be in your shoes because I know you're a professional. You're coming in and you're talking to sellers about what you know to be true based on stats, based on data, but they're emotionally tied to this house if it's their home, and they don't always agree with your number, but yet you're responsible for getting that number for them.
Right.
That's just got to be hard. So hats off to you for working with sellers and going through that whole process. But what are your thoughts? Do you think it's a good idea? Yeah, we'll price it up here and then we'll just lower it.
So I'm never opposed to trying anything. I
Okay.
always want to set expectations, trying anything pricing wise. I always want to set expectations. Try anything once. I always want to set expectations with the seller of, hey, here is what the market says your property's worth. And I am basing that valuation on recently sold properties, what's active on the market, and really the data behind the valuation. I have looked at thousands probably of appraisals in my time in selling real estate. So I see how appraisers make the adjustments. I see how the appraisers make their valuations. And it's not just me guessing at what kind of adjustments they're going to make. And so I look at all that and I say, based on that, realistically, your home's probably going to sell here. If you want to try putting your home at this price and maybe a cash buyer who doesn't care about the value comes along and makes an offer, we can try that. If it doesn't happen within the first week or so, it's probably not going to happen. We need to adjust our price And like you said, once you start doing that, then you're kind of chasing the market, and you're at the mercy in a balanced market or a buyer's market, kind of like we're in, meaning there's 6 months of inventory or close to it or more. You don't want to be chasing the market. You don't want to be guessing at what your home's going to sell for, or listing so high and then chasing it, because every week you're trying to figure out, okay, well, if we drop it to this price, if we drop it to that price, and that's not a fun spot to be at.
Well, plus it's emotional.
It is.
You know, I mean, selling a house is emotional. I mean, and the preparation, because I know, I mean, I've worked with you when you're working with sellers, and they prepared their house to be put on the market. And then you have to keep it prepared to be shown at any time and live life in the house. It's stressful. And so every week that it hasn't sold, you're like, man, that's another week I'm not able to live in my house because I've got to have it ready. I just the emotions of that, which is why me personally as a seller, I just want to price it to sell and move.
Right. And that's one thing that, every appointment that I go on, I almost get the feeling that the homeowner that I'm sitting across from thinks that I'm against them. My job as their listing agent is to put as much money in their pocket as possible so that they can move on to their next stage in life. And whenever they get this feeling that I'm combating, that I'm trying to talk them down on their price, I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to set them up for success. And so whenever I tell them, if I say your home's worth $350, it's probably, if we listed at $357.5, $360, we'll probably get a reasonable offer fairly quickly. And they're like, well, we want to try it at $425. Whenever you do that, you drastically shrink the buyer pool, and you pretty much are just guaranteeing that your home's going to take longer to sell and probably for less money. When people say, well, let's see what happens when we price it high, I can tell you what's going to happen.
Right.
People are going to look at it online. They're going to say, no, thanks. And that's, it's a hard conversation to have, because like I said, everybody wants the most money. I want to see my clients walk away with the most money. And that's what that's what we do is whenever it comes to selling a property, there's 3 main factors that are going to make that property sell. It's condition, which a seller can fix things or they cannot.
Right.
There's location, which you cannot change that. It is what it is. There's pricing, which I guess there's 4 things. So pricing, which we have control over, and marketing, which we do a great job of making sure that we're getting high quality content about people's listings out there. And so, we can control marketing, we can control condition, or maybe we can't. Maybe the homeowner's strapped and they can't do anything to fix that.
Right.
Then we have to adjust pricing.
Right.
And
you change marketing.
Yeah, you can change marketing. Yeah.
For the condition, but
for the condition, correct. Yeah. But that's one thing that is one of the biggest factors on a property selling. Whenever a homeowner comes to me and they say, well, our property's not selling at the price we want, can you do something different to market it? Maybe market it to California buyers. And I'm like, they're going to use local real estate agents.
Right.
Like, yes, they have a little bit more disposable income after they sell their 1,200 square foot,
still have to get their
$3 million
attention.
Property, but you still have to get their attention. They're still using local market experts, and you can't just dupe them into buying your property for more than what it's worth.
Right.
So,
well, and I think too, and you and I've experienced this on, with buyers right now. The expectations of buyers are for sellers to help more with their closing costs, and so there's also that point where if you price it too high, it's not going to sell right away, and you start lowering it. Well, then as you're lowering it, then a buyer's thinking, oh, they're desperate to sell.
Yeah.
And I need some closing costs. So this one's been on the market for a little bit, and they've already lowered the price a little bit. So I'm going to go for this one and ask for some closing costs, which then becomes emotional for a seller, because it's like, I've already lowered this price, this home, $15,000, and you're asking for $15,000 in closing costs. Now I'm taking a $30,000 hit when that's not reality, but emotionally that's the thought process.
Right, exactly. And I think the biggest thing that we haven't talked about is the appraisal. Yes, if it's a cash buyer, there's no appraisal, but cash buyers, in my experience,
they're savvy buyers.
They're savvy buyers. They have that money for a reason.
Right.
And they buy property under their own circumstances,
Right.
with their conditions and their criteria. But whenever it comes to the appraisal, if the property doesn't appraise, then we're wasting everybody's time. Then the home has to go back on the market. Then, the buyer's out there, their inspection and option and appraisal fee. The seller and usually the appraisal is not in until 10 days before closing is typically what I see. So the seller's already packing.
Right.
They've got a property under
house
contract.
is no longer staged. It's not in the same condition anymore because it hadn't been,
And so there's all these inconveniences that pop up whenever a property doesn't appraise. And with every property on the listing or buyer side that I've had not appraise, I knew going into it that it wasn't going to appraise. And we were crossing our fingers, hoping. And whenever we get a bad appraisal and a seller's like, well, what can you do? And I'm like, they're using the same comps that I would use.
Yeah.
And I can't
rarely is there adjustments to be made.
Yeah. And I'll go through and look and see, but these appraisers are also, they're good at what they do, and they do this on a day in and day out basis. And they're not just going to, it's just because you painted the walls a different color and put down a different, your favorite flooring. Yeah. They're not going to change the price.
But I think what the audience needs to understand is it's all based on the pricing strategy in the very beginning.
Yeah.
And if you're working with a local, knowledgeable agent that knows how to price the property, the best thing you can do is just take their advice and price it correctly up front to avoid all of these things that you and I know happen.
Yeah.
We've seen it happen over and over, and it wasn't a fluke.
Right.
It was all in the strategy. So you pay a lot of money for representation.
Yeah.
And it just is like, if you're going to pay for the service, take the service.
Right.
Use the service.
Yeah.
So.
And it's one of the more frustrating things of being a listing agent is a lot of agents will go in and, they'll basically buy the listing, meaning
they'll tell you whatever you want to hear and they'll list it at whatever.
Yeah. And then they'll start dropping the price. And so that's one of the big challenges I have is, if I'm talking to a homeowner and they think they can get 50,000 more using someone else, they're not going to work with me.
Right.
Or at least not for 6 months. They're not, you know, so.
Right.
Anyways, it's
what
fine
always
line.
It is, and before we wrap it up, the other part of this too is, as a real estate agent, you're investing a lot of your personal money to get the property sold. So you're not doing anybody a service. If you price it right and you believe in the price, you don't mind spending the money.
Right.
But why would you price it at a price that there's not going to be a successful outcome and spend all of that money? It doesn't make sense. You wouldn't, as a real estate agent, be in business for very long.
Yeah.
And so again, working with someone that's reputable, who's local, who's an expert, I think is so important in the whole pricing strategy. And then we could have a whole nother conversation about the negotiations of it all, because I see such poor negotiations on being on the lending side of transactions. And as long as I've been doing this as a buyer or seller personally and professionally, sometimes I just want to stop in and just go, wait, time out. You guys are doing this wrong. So that's another whole episode.
I was going to say, we could
go into a whole nother episode about just negotiations.
Tripping over dollars to pick up pennies on negotiations too.
All day long. Yeah. But anyway, let's just wrap up this episode.
Yeah. Well, thank y'all for checking out this episode of Unlocking Doors. Be sure and leave a comment, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comment section some topics that you would like us to discuss on our next episode. We hope you guys are doing well, and we will see you on the next one.